Hi, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today, where we are lucky enough to be joined by one of our industry partners and one of the industry experts that we love working with here, working with Phil today from Enghouse Interactive. Our session today is the first of a two-part series where we're really going to go through ways to, I guess I would call it cutting through the noise and really focus on what elements need to be thinking about and preparing for when you're evaluating whether it's contact center platforms or all of the other new innovations that continue to emerge within our industry. In an environment of constant change and rising and changing customer expectations, it's critical that you really have a good view of what really matters both now and into the future. So the session today will really help you understand that and how you should approach selecting those technology choices. We'll certainly explore some key factors around the types of questions to ask vendors and how to ensure the platform delivers resilience and agility and ultimately gives you that great customer experience that you're after. In the spirit of reconciliation, Auscontact acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes, and during that time, with the help of today's guests, we hope that the session provides some interesting insights into things that you really need to think about when you are building a plan to go to market. What we want for you is to actually have the successful implementation and make it that what you deliver actually gives the outcomes that you're after for your customer. To round off the session today, as always, we'll have some Q&A. But what I will encourage all of you to do is participate throughout and drop those Q&A questions as we work along. I'm Fran Southwood, CEO of Auscontact and your moderator for today. I'll just run through a little bit of general housekeeping with you before we get started. As I said, interacting is the best way for you to get the most out of the session. We would love to see you maximize those benefits. So you don't need to take too many notes. We'll provide you with the recording of the webinar afterwards. If you've got questions, as I said, we'd love you to use the Q&A button on the control panel. But again, use the chat feature as well. If you've got comments or questions for Phil or myself, them in there as you think of them. Otherwise, if you're anything like me, you will forget very best questions by the time it comes to the formal Q&A at the end. If the questions or the comments are in relation to what Phil's actually covering and it's totally relevant, we'll actually jump in with those there and then. So again, if you've got a burning question or something that you think needs to be explored further, let us know. We can let the session go there. If you are listening through headphones or speakers and have any issues with your connection, just use the raise hand button and one of the team will jump in and help. I'm going to stop talking and I am going to pass over to Phil Robson, who is our speaker for today. Phil is the sales manager from Enghouse Interactive. And he's got far more interesting things to be discussing than me introducing him. So Phil, let's get this one started. Looking forward to a great session today.
Thanks so much, Fran, and good afternoon, everyone. Really looking forward to diving into a topic that's become increasingly critical for organisations of all sizes, and that's evaluating your contact centre platform. What's important now, and beyond. As Fran says, my name's Phil Robson. I work as a sales manager for Enghouse Interactive. For those of you who haven't come across Enghouse Interactive before, we're actually one of 5 divisions of Enghouse Systems, which is a publicly traded Canadian software and services provider. I'll cover off more about Enghouse Interactive in a minute, but just to go through the other divisions. So we've got Enghouse Video, which specialises in secure, high-quality video systems and telehealth solutions. Enghouse Networks, which is providing telecommunications and network solutions to global service providers. The Transportation Division enhances transportation systems for businesses like logistics, emergency services. There's fare collections, fleet management as well. And then we've got a specialist group which delivers tailored mobile devices and market research tools. So I work for Enghouse Interactive. we focus on customer experience solutions. We empower organizations with technologies such as advanced contact centers, AI-driven automation, record and quality management. And we manage this through our large CX portfolio. Enghouse kind of prides itself on having one of the largest CX portfolios in the industry, and that's mainly down to our 30+ years as an acquisition company. Each new product line we acquire, we integrate into our portfolio, so we further develop and enhance the feature set. We're a global company. We've got development teams based all over the world, but our native Teams contact center solution, which is known as Communication Center, or some of you might know it as Touchpoint, is actually developed right here in the ANZ region. So it's good to have that local presence here. So let's kick off, and before we get into it, let's look at the kind of the contact center landscape in Australia, because in this region it's very much in transition. So we're seeing a mix of older legacy platforms that have been around for a number of years, but these are sitting alongside kind of more modern cloud-based solutions. And it's still very common for contact centers to be operating phone only, or maybe phone and email or web chat. There is a gradual move into other multimedia channels, and customers' expectations is really moving at quite a rate. It's racing ahead, and they do want more digital channels. People want to self-service. We're in a generation where everyone's used to doing everything themselves. The self-service options are really popular. Fast resolution is always required across whichever media you choose as well. So this is really driving a push for resilience and agility within the contact centers, and organizations need to modernize, not just for today's needs, but they need to prepare for the next wave of customer demands as well. And the big challenge for customer experience contact centers is, how do you innovate without causing too much risky disruption? So what I'm going to do is we're going to look at 4 typical technology setups you'll find in a traditional contact center, and we're going to explore how each one of these evolves with new technologies to meet the needs of now and beyond. So the 4 technologies are foundational, emerging, maturing, and advanced. At the end, after I've been through all 4, we will run a quick poll to see which category everyone thinks they fit into. So take note and think where you potentially fit. So we're going to start with foundational. So this is the starting point for many small, less mature contact centers. Most of them will be using technology to manage their phone calls. So they're a traditional call center, as we used to know them. They may offer other channels to customers as a method of being contacted, but sometimes these channels will normally exist in individual silos rather than integrated into the contact center. A prime example of this is emails. So a lot of companies will still manage emails through a traditional Outlook inbox rather than having it integrated to the contact center. And this means that agents usually have to take time away from answering the phone calls to go and manage those emails. And this may work. A lot of businesses run that quite successfully, but it does create inefficiencies. You're not going to get the benefits of a true omni-channel contact center. So in an omni-channel world, all your channels are integrated and handled by the same platform, the same group of agents, normally through the same user interface as well. And when you onboard the digital channels into your contact center, you benefit from all the features and functionalities you associate with the voice channel. So, for example, you can distribute emails based on agent skills. You can route and prioritize emails based on keywords you find in the subject and the body of the email. But most importantly, it comes down to reporting. So managers can report on the combined customer experience across all the media channels rather than a single interaction. And you can report on all your interactions your agents are handling, not just voice as well. So adding media channels into the contact center rather than operating them separately, it ensures that all your customer interactions are tracked and prioritized properly. And it also gives you an insight into how efficiently your team are operating. Fran, before I move on to the next one, have you got any comments or any questions?
Not any questions so much, Phil, but I think, again, this is that real critical foundation part that if we're seeing so many organizations jump to the solutions that they want to implement without really thinking through what is it we have, what is the problem we want to solve, and what do our what's that strategic lens of customer. So I think, as you say, really thinking through that foundational piece is so critical to getting this right and not ending up where we are seeing some organizations at the moment at the end of implementation of something they thought was going to solve a problem that they hadn't actually explored properly. So again, the criticality around really kind of taking that time to think about how do I actually approach this? What are the things I need to know about what I'm dealing with within the environment itself before just jumping into thinking, the solution you need is key. So, yeah.
And you need to get the basic right. So the foundations have got to be there. So you've got to get this stage right before you start evolving and bringing on more technologies as we see. So it's important to, to get this one correct.
Definitely.
So moving on, next we have the emerging stage. So, these are existing omni-channel contact centers. Many companies are progressing from simply managing phones or emails to web chats. And here they want more visibility, more control. So at this stage, the challenge is often around consistency and compliance. Are your agents following the right procedures and processes? Do your managers have insights to coach effectively as well? So there's technology like call recording, which I think is a great option at this stage. Actually, I must stop calling it call recording because it goes far beyond just capturing the voice calls. It's about capturing the full spectrum of customer interactions across all your channels. So that includes, text recording across all your digital channels like emails and web chats and SMSs. And most recording platforms these days will have advanced filtering tools that make it easy to retrieve and analyze all these interactions by different media types. And they're offering insights into both agent performance and customer behavior. The other thing that a lot of kind of recording platforms have is screen recording. Now, in the past, screen recording has had a bit of a bad rap. I think people see it as quite an invasive technology to be able to record the agent's desktop and what they're doing on the desktops. But customers that I have spoken to that have implemented screen recording really rave around how it's changed their lives. So previously, when they were listening to calls, they're listening to the agent and the customer, and they're kind of blind to what the agent is doing while they're on the call. Whereas having enabled screen recording, it allows the supervisors to be able to navigate and use see how the agents are using the tools on the desktop. For example, how are they accessing CRM systems? What information are they getting from the knowledge base? Is it correct and up to date? So by capturing interactions with different applications, it just allows them to, maybe identify bottlenecks and help improve workflows and maybe, a need for more agent training. So yeah, screen recording is one thing I'd definitely look at recommending if you're thinking about it. And most call recording solutions have some form of quality management tool, which allow you to evaluate performances of agents. And by evaluating these interactions, supervisors can, provide personal coaching to the agents, and it ensures, the service qualities are continually met as well. And it's a great way for supervisors to provide direct feedback, and it helps the agents refine their communication skills over time, I think. Other techs to consider at this stage: CRM integration. So here we're connecting the contact centers at other broader business applications, providing things like screen pop, so we can pop specific applications. We can deliver call details, customer history to the agent on an incoming call, so they can personalize the interaction quicker and more effectively as well. So yeah, that's an emerging contact center. So there you really look. I mean, if there's one bit of tech I would recommend for any contact centers that's a must for now and into the future, it's call recording. I mean, the ability to record interactions, because as you'll see later on, it's going to enhance your life, especially with AI now. It opens up a whole new world into customer insights. So yeah, really important bit of tech.
Well, I think
Any
the
comments,
other,
Fran? Yeah.
yeah, I was just going to say, I think the other key element here is that as we continue to see some of the regulatory requirements continue to strengthen, um, this actually helps you. The coverage it gives you, the audit trail that it provides, the ability to actually think differently about some of those compliance elements. It is absolutely foundational key. And people that aren't doing it or aren't thinking about when they're going to do it, they're really leaving themselves open.
It is. It's a safety net, and
Yeah.
we do a lot of work with local governments, and there was always a pushback from local governments to record. But those that have taken, the step and moved into it, once the residents have found out that the calls are being recorded, they're better behaved. They know that their calls are going to be recorded. They know they've got to be accountable for their actions. So, and the agents love it. It's a safety net if there's any issues. But as you'll see later on, it's just going to open up a whole new world, what you can do with call recordings these days. So yeah, definitely something that needs to be invested in. So moving on now to the maturing stage. So here customers are already, running a professional contact center. I think when you get to this stage, they've got a lot of the bells and the whistles, but the next pressure point is scale and keeping up with the customer expectation. Customers expecting to connect on a range of different channels, and managers need to probably look at automation in order to keep the service levels high, rather than just keep adding more and more headcount. So tech to consider here, if you're already using web chat as a method and that's being handled by agent, then obviously the next step is to look at chatbots, which is also going to expand your self-service options. And as I said, people always like to self-serve. And in the last few years, there's been a lot of enhancements in chatbots. They very much used to be very structured content that they used to get from knowledge bases, and it always used to have to be pre-approved and had to be in a particular format. And the downside of that was sometimes it just didn't answer the customer's questions. It was too generic and didn't provide the right information back to the customer. But now with AI, obviously, and AI technology, these chatbots can ingest information from various sources, so websites and knowledge bases, and they can provide generative answers based on the contents of that source. So it allows them to provide more specific, responses to the questions. AI is also being used in quality management. I spoke earlier about the ability to, evaluate interactions for agent training and agent quality assurance. And with transcription now, it allows us to evaluate 100% of the interactions. So when we're doing manual evaluations, typically you can normally only manually evaluate 2 to 3% of calls. So, per agent, you're probably only doing maybe 5 to 10 calls, a week or a month, depending how many agents you've got. But once you use AI to automate that process, not only are you saving the supervisors or the team leaders or the quality assurance team, you're saving them a huge amount of time. You're also increasing the sample size of your data. So you're moving from 2 to 3% of the calls to 50 or 100% of the calls. So data is going to be a lot more accurate, a lot more information there. Other things to consider is workforce management tools. So if your staff are about to, increase and you're looking to optimize your staffing levels, ensuring you have the right people available at the right time, then workforce management tools can be quite important, especially if you have different agents with different skills across all the different channels. You've got to make sure you've got coverage of all your different channels to make sure they can all be effectively serviced correctly. We've also got knowledge services now. So we've got the ability using AI and transcription to provide, information to agents to support them to give up-to-date and quick information. And if you do a lot of outbound calling, then maybe you can look to invest in a system that manages outbound campaigns more effectively, where you can upload telephone numbers and databases and start to get them delivered through to agents and blend into the contact center. So this is where AI is starting to play a key role, and it's automating these tasks, and it's assisting the agents and the supervisors. And it's starting to make a real difference, make them a lot more efficient. Any questions on that one, Fran, or any comments?
We're seeing organisations really kind of lean into this now, and I think we've talked about a lot of these tech applications for the last couple of years, really. We're sort of seeing them, start to emerge in small pilots and small trials. And I think in the early stages, there was a real focus on, they're going to they're going to change how we think about contact centers, right? We're going to not need contact centers in some instances. Probably where we're seeing real opportunity now is that these are about assisting human component that's still required in the contact center as well. So it's assuming we've done some other foundational work to remove what I call the noise, those low-hanging, low-value work types that hopefully you can use other technology, whether it's AI, automation, to really remove them from the network and stop customers needing to actually reach out to you. And then suddenly this is about what's left over is more complex. The customers you're often dealing with, potentially the profile of the customers is different as well. So suddenly the opportunity here to think differently about knowledge support, to think differently about how, that quality management you talked about transitions into a coaching tool with clear links into training, how it improves speed and competency. So all of those things suddenly are really focused on creating the right environment for your people to thrive. We've already dealt with the calls that don't need to come. So how do we actually really focus on making the ones that do need to come managed effectively, and delivering real service excellence? So I love how we're seeing this holistic view about the tech and how it makes the environment one where people can thrive, but equally it's a super efficient environment. Huge opportunity in my mind.
Yeah, it is, and yeah, with AI, obviously, as you say, AI is evolving really quickly with agentic AI coming along. There is talk of replacing agents, but I think at this stage we're definitely looking at using AI as a tool to assist and automate processes and make things a lot easier. And companies just need to evaluate all this tech and see how it best fits into their business strategy, I think, moving forward. But yeah, exciting times. So that's maturing. Moving on to the advanced stage. So the advanced stage companies are already running multi-channels. They're probably already using some kind of automation, to be honest. And that the focus now shifts to intelligence and continuing that improvement. Just like the last stage, they're probably using AI-powered quality management to ensure every interaction is evaluated consistently. They may be using AI tools for call summarization. So this is where you get a transcription. The call can be summarized into 3 or 4 sentences containing key follow-up items and key takeaway items as well. They may be using content analyzers these days. So rather than manually mapping up calls at the end of the call, you can now get the system to analyze the content of the conversation to determine how best to categorize that. And the scale of a contact center, workforce management becomes more critical as it's increasing and building. For these larger, more complex teams, you've got to probably look more around your rostering and your agent adherence and make sure that the workforce management is in place and correct. But at this advanced stage, I think organizations should really be looking to unlock some of the data that is tied up in contact centers. I mentioned earlier about call recordings, and contact centers are a goldmine of information. There is so much actionable data, and you can actually use that to transform and make decisions on how you deliver customer service, how you engage with your customers, with customer insights, or some people know it as voice of the customer. We've got analytical solutions now that can extract insights on patterns, on emotions, on churn risks, on intent, from a wide range of digital media, including transcriptions of call recordings, from emails, from web chat transcripts. It can look at sentiment of the interactions as well, and provide categorization on what type of interactions are driving the most positive and negative sentiment, and the call volumes associated with those. So implementing sentiment analysis and topic extraction, you can help to uncover those negative experiences and identify areas of improvement. So this stage is really about unlocking customer experience as a competitive advantage. So using advanced analytics and AI, not just to manage the service, but to drive the business and customer service growth. That's really the kind of where this stage is going. Any thoughts on that one, Fran?
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Look, I think that where we're also seeing some new thinking emerge, and you touched on a little bit there with, really transitioning to some of the proactive approaches to the work. So shifting away from, what's in front of us to actually start thinking about whether it's called that next best action or, different ways that you can actually connect with, potentially customers who aren't actively talking to you. Sometimes they're the ones we actually want to talk to. Again, we talk about those things that are currently deployed, Phil. I think there are still probably lots of room for improvement with some of that true omni-channel, as far as how things transition and actually build that whole of customer count or view of kind of what they've done and where they could go next. But there's such great opportunity when you think about voice of customer and what it's really telling us. I know you would probably see the same thing. We talk to a lot of organizations who have a real view of what they think the voice of the customer is telling them. And it might be that they've got, sort of surveys and things like that going out there, but they're not really asking in a really modern way. I don't know about you, but some of the perceptions then are what then design kind of the next solution. So I think it's really important that even with all of this tech to consider and that future positioning, what are we doing to ensure and continue to recheck that it actually still delivers what customers need, and it's going to align to that organizational strategy, so that light on the hill, that where we're heading, what is it we're trying to do with our customer, but is it the way the customer wants? I've worked in big organizations before where we had very, very, very defined views of how the customer should interact with us and how the customer would interact with us. And so we would go ahead on our merry way, designing solutions based on our view of customer. And funnily enough, the uptake was never there, or it wasn't optimized. It wasn't what we thought it should have been. But it's because we forgot customer in that whole conversation. We forgot to check in. We forgot to, really connect and make sure that what we thought was shiny and great and exciting actually still gave them what they need in the way they needed it. So we're seeing a lot of organizations really think about how they design that roadmap in a way that meets the customer where the customer's at. Regardless of my view of where I want the customer to be, sometimes we've got to kind of give a little in relation to that whole, kind of interplay. I love that we're starting to see, that real sort of connection and interplay between workforce management, how that connects through what are we doing with outbound campaigns, what is our quality management, and how can all of that inform different component of when it's not working to its optimum. So I love that, the new tech and the innovation we're seeing in the market is really kind of building this whole ecosystem that has so many triggers and levers that we can pull, but equally it's giving us so much information. The challenge is actually listening to it and understanding how to then act. So I think that as much as it excites me that we've got the new and emerging opportunities through those applications, the challenge remains for organizations to really kind of utilize all the data and really understand what next, what else, so what, all that kind of, all the stuff that, data nerds love, which I love it. So yeah,
I think it's great, and especially, I mean, if you look at call recording, how that has just evolved. You go back to to 25 years, and people used to record calls for compliance reasons, for resolution, and legal requirements, and they used to just record and then archive them off in a safe somewhere, and they never saw the light of day. And it's not till now that you can actually then pull all those call recordings out of the
yeah,
archive, and you can start to analyze them and get this information around voice of the customer. And so
yeah.
it's becoming really valuable. So it's
I saw
yeah.
I saw this interesting. It was a post on LinkedIn actually yesterday, and it was just a picture that it said, you know, I'm wondering if my call recording has ever really been used for training and quality purposes. And I thought, so interesting, right? That's what we've been kind of fed for all those years. Um, but if I think back to my time at big organisations, were we really using it for that? Did we actually have this holistic view that said, apart from, my staff used to hate the idea of QA, right? So it was always about getting, pinged type thing, that sort of language. But I think the maturity and the opportunity now is really about how can we use this effectively. We've got a couple of questions, Phil. I'm just going to jump in with them. And one here from Paul, and he's just sort of saying any thoughts to share on asynchronous chat, like pros and cons. So we are seeing some suddenly jump in and be using WhatsApp and things like that. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, you broke up a bit when you said that. You're talking about social media. Were they talking about social media conversations?
Synchro- Synchronous chat. So things
Okay.
like, yeah, your WhatsApp, your messaging, stuff like that.
Yeah,
Obviously, we've got, yeah, go,
yeah, I was going to say, really, it depends on your demographic. You got to know your
yeah,
demographic for your customers, and obviously whether they're going to utilize. Most customers will have some form of, and it may not be WhatsApp. It will be, maybe the old Twitter or X. They have some form of social media, but it will normally go to a marketing, department somewhere, not necessarily the customer experience team. So whether you want to, onboard that into the customer experience team through WhatsApp and through, Facebook Messenger and things like that. Even SMS we've found in the past, although people have discussed that as being a channel, we've never really, I don't think it's taken off as an inbound channel. A lot of people use it as a way of connecting, sending outbound text as well. But I think, yeah, the digital channels are something that need to be considered. And as generations evolve, and the younger generations come through and start utilizing them and buying services, and yeah, they may be used to using these WhatsApp and the Facebook messengers and these social media tools as well. So definitely something to consider.
yeah. Well, I'm probably not, Paul, seeing um, any really, yeah, results from um, organisations using it at the moment. I know quite a few that are doing some pilots and some trials. And again, the challenge between, you know, they've got their own, you know, chat feature in some different systems. So it's again about what is it that the customer actually will get out of that that's different to what they've got? How do they ensure? So again, like the pros, the key is making sure it's then still all part of that customer record, and it's searchable and visible and all of those things for the next interaction, and sort of determining that customer history. But yeah, we might have to look into if we can get some case studies on any that are really sort of going with it, and keep you posted on that one. So we'll
Yeah,
do
they,
that.
they always pop up in tenders and RFP. People normally have them as a requirement or a nice to have. But
Yeah,
as you say, they're probably just making sure the solution's got the capabilities of achieving that.
that future
If
proofing, right?
one day,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
you don't know which direction it's going to turn, and so it's
yeah.
just making sure the capabilities there if required. But you need to know your demographic and work out whether it's going to be utilized enough to warrant the
Warrant it.
investment.
Yeah, and look, I think it's like any channel, right? The real challenge is we are very good at turning new channels on. not so good at turning them off. Funnily enough, there are still organisations with fax machines out there, right? So the other part of it is saying, actually, if I'm just turning on another channel, how am I resourcing it? If you think about something like WhatsApp, I expect, we use it in our organisation. Now, I expect those messages to be seen and responded to. So suddenly you've got a really different thing to think about in your operating rhythm, as far as your capacity. Is it always turned on? What's that look like? So I think you're right, Phil. There is a need to recognise that longer term, it's a capability that will start to, challenge some of the traditionals.
Another thing we're
But
seeing is sorry to interrupt. Another thing we're
no,
seeing is some companies are starting to develop their own apps, especially
yeah,
customer facing ones. Again, local government, they seem to be creating their own apps that residents can go into, and often within there they may have a a contact option. Where
yep,
people can put in a telephone number and a time and date they want to be contacted. That can then
yeah,
integrate to the contact center, use a REST API to initiate a web callback, and then they could be called
yep,
back that way. So yeah, it's kind of companies developing their own platforms, I suppose, for
yeah,
communicating as well. So which
yeah.
is it's good to offer that to customers.
Nice segue. We've got a question here in relation to data and data security. So, and it's specifically about government, local government. So the question here, how do you ensure data is protected when considering using AI for local government agencies? And, you could take out local government agency, you could insert bank, you could insert federal, state government. Like I think everybody is grappling with that same data security um,
Yeah,
challenge,
I do have a
particularly
slide on
around,
that.
yeah.
I do
Oh,
have a
we'll get to that.
slide coming up. I don't know if you want me to answer it now or wait till I
Well,
get to the
let's
security.
park it. Yeah,
Okay.
let's come back to that one. But yeah, we'll cover that one off soon.
Yeah, I think next we're going to get into, there's a bit of a poll, so just to get a bit of a feel of where everyone thinks they
Mm,
fit into those different categories. So I think a poll's popped up on the screen, so if everyone can, yeah, choose whether you think you're foundational, you're just using voice and maybe, email via an Outlook or something like that. Emerging, you've got voice and maybe email or web chat. Whether you're maturing, so you're already running those omni-channel options, you're probably doing call recording, you may have some integration to CRM systems, or whether you're the advanced contact center, so you're kind of way ahead using chatbots, summarization, knowledge assistance. So it'd be good to get a feel of where most people are.
there's a bit of a spread there, right?
Well, I'm hoping there's not too many advanced. The fact that people are on this call wanting to know about advancements,
There's,
you
there's one there. I want to talk to you. No.
yeah,
That's probably not surprising for me, Phil, to
yeah.
see sort of that those first three stages are really kind of where we're seeing people kind of firmly sit. Probably foundational and emerging is really kind of across the environment, probably where we're seeing most in the Australian market. We have been a little slow to sort of emerge as far as adoption goes, but we're certainly seeing more of those small contained pilots continuing to emerge now with those use cases, and applying my ever favorite term of fail fast, right? So really be mindful of not dragging that chain out. So
Well, another good term, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So a lot of people just,
yeah, yeah,
continue with
yeah,
what they know, and if it
yeah,
works, they're happy. But yeah,
yeah,
you do need to adapt. You do need to change as customers' expectations and technology changes. So yeah, you do need to stay out your comfort zone.
yeah.
Perfect.
No,
Okay.
that's good.
Okay. Um, so how do we transition, from one stage to the next? Let's talk about that for a bit. So obviously the key here is building out a roadmap. So, but it's important to remind yourselves that technology shouldn't just be adopted just for the sake of it. There's a tendency to think that because everyone, and you read about this all the time, that everyone is adopting AI, so that you've got to do it. You've got to move forward and implement AI as a matter of urgency. But every new tool has got to be evaluated with a clear framework? Does it address a real business pain point or a customer opportunity, or are you just adding cost or complexity? Return on investment is something that should be used all the time. Every automation project should be based on a return on investment calculation. You can normally put your kind of roadmap, your wish list into three buckets. You've got your immediate wins, your low expenses, no effort, high impact ones, things like implementing something as simple as callback within the contact center, or changing announcements, or changing your auto attendance structure, or even just putting a frequently asked questions up on your website. These are things that could very simple, easy to do, but can have a huge impact. You then have your medium term wish list, which is more expensive and does require a bit of a return on investments. And that's things like your digital channels, your emails, your web chats, your call recordings. And then you obviously got your longer term investments, more expensive CRM integrations, chatbots, and customer insights as well. But we also need to ask whether the technology, improves the organization's resilience and agility as well. So you've got to ensure the contact center can adapt to unexpected changes in demand, and consider whether it's future proof. Can it scale? Can it evolve as customers' expectations change? As businesses' expectations change as well, and technology changes. There's lots of moving parts here, so we need to learn to adapt and have that ability to do so.
Well, I think that's one of the real challenges for organizations. New tech is a big investment. Budgets are tight. There's real financial pressure around the market, regardless of what vertical you are in. And some people I'm speaking to are saying, because if I jump in, like that investment, it's got to be right. So there's almost this hesitancy around some of those decisions, because it is such a big investment for the organization, right? So it's, again, it makes it actually more important to go through this process of really critically analyzing, why am I doing this? Is it just because it's cool and someone said, oh, you should go and get that AI thing? Or does it actually line up with, number one, who we are as an organization and what our commitment is to our customers? And will this change how that operates? Will it make it easier? Will it make it more effective? Will it make it, so we can more, et cetera, et cetera. But the financial investment certainly is something that a lot of organizations, are kind of sitting there going, I've got to get this right, because if I get it wrong, actually that money's gone, and suddenly I'm living with what I've got. And we say a lot, today's the worst it's going to ever be as far as tech and innovation. So people are almost afraid to jump in too quickly, because what if tomorrow something else emerges? And I guess from your perspective, some of the things you're really talking about here around foundation piece, and they're not going to change regardless. Some of the applications that can then be added on to that foundation, yeah, they'll improve, etc. But probably people shouldn't be afraid to step in. I get the financial component, but again, if the focus is on the foundation, and it's part of that strategic roadmap, they're in a much stronger position as far as really understanding kind of, not only the order of things, what is my ROI, what is that impact the customer. So, really getting underneath this is critical to help you, almost have that evidence base behind your decision making.
It's difficult to know, with technology changing quickly, it's difficult to know where to go. But it's also important. I mean, web chat's a prime example of that. If you're going to implement, web chat, don't go out and buy a chatbot from day one. It's a phased approach. You've got to put the web chat in a manual, make sure your agents can answer that, get some data behind the types of, interactions you're receiving, how many you're receiving, and then you can, if that channel takes off, you can then look at automation through chatbots and AI and things like that. You can put the investment in where it's required, rather than just throwing money at it to begin with, because it's the thing to do at the moment. So
I think that's really good advice though, right? And again, it goes back to those small sensible, targeted approaches to pilots.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So what we've done is we've kind of, now you've got your framework and your roadmap, there's critical questions about can deliver this. So we've put together some questions you can, ask potential vendors that'll help you make the decision. So deployment models is an interesting one. Most people these days are looking for cloud solutions, although cloud can be delivered in a number of different ways. You've got public cloud model, so contact center platforms are hosted on shared infrastructure, maybe by third party, AWS or Microsoft, and these are great for companies who want to reduce their technology footprint. They offer scalability, they're low upfront cost, there's minimal infrastructure management, so ideal for kind of smaller contact centers and startups, quick and easy. But with cloud services, you should always check to see where that service is hosted. And I will get on to security, but you need to know if your data is in region. Data sovereignty is a big topic of discussion these days. So where is your data stored and how is it secured? Some vendors will offer private cloud options. So rather than being a multi-tenanted approach, the service is provided on dedicated infrastructure. This tends to give you a bit more control and customization for security or compliance needs. And don't forget that on-premise isn't dead. So we're still seeing customers that like to keep full control over their infrastructure. And when I say on-premise, you kind of have pictures of a comms room, with racks of servers. But these days, basically on-premise means the customer is responsible for the infrastructure. So whether that means they're hosting it on their own, in their own building, in their own data center, or maybe they've got their own Azure or AWS instance. So it just means they're hosting the infrastructure. And it appeals to customers where data security is a priority. It's important that they manage their own data in their own environment. Maybe they've got some bespoke applications they need to integrate to, and it may lead to on-premise being a more preferred solution. And even if you do deploy on-premise, there's options. You can still leverage cloud services. So a lot of these AI services are up in the cloud. So you've got an on-prem solution, but you're using, AI services. So it becomes a bit of a hybrid combination. So you get in the best of both worlds. So the bottom line is you should, if you're not ready to go full cloud, then look for a flexible vendor who supports multiple deployment options. They can discuss the best option for you and let you transition at your own pace. I suppose that's the main thing there. Support as well, local support, local services. If you're subscribing to a cloud, find out where the deployment services and support is provided from. Is it in region? If you need on-site training, for example, are they able to service that as well? It might be important to you. It's just something to consider. And of course, everyone is looking at AI. So, how mature are the AI automation capabilities? Don't just deploy AI for the sake of it. Ask about proven use cases. We've discussed this. You've got to look for evidence that the tools will truly improve, the customers and the agents' experiences. As generative AI continue to evolve, a lot of organizations, you need to look beyond those core features, as you said. Don't just, tick a box and say, I want AI. You need to evaluate the ethical practices of potential vendors as well. So focus on data integrity and transparency. It's critical when you leverage, for AI responsibilities as well. Do you integrate into CRM systems, Microsoft Teams or other systems as well? So ask about the contact center and how it will integrate into your business tools. So I've seen some companies that have deployed cloud contact center solutions that use a different phone system to the rest of the organization, which means the CX team really struggle to do the basics like transfer a call to the rest of the business. If internal communication is really important, don't isolate your contact center from the rest of the business. So, make sure they're all using the same phone system. Make sure if they need to transfer the call, they can see who's available, who's busy. They've got that presence of the rest of the business as well. That's really important integration. And lastly, obviously about, experience. So it's look beyond the features. You want a vendor, a partner who understands your industry. So, check what similar organizations they have worked with as well. Do reference checks as always. Any questions there, Fran?
I think these are really key questions to be asking. And I would say to anyone listening that's starting to go out, each one of these questions almost has a set of information underneath it. So if you think about question one, what does cloud give you? What does hybrid give you? What does on-prem give you? So really kind of go deep on what this is asking for. And you almost need an organizational position. So what is it that, how do each of those different options, how do they meet the requirements for number one, or the needs of your organization, and what are the pros and cons of them? In the past, we said cloud was the only thing that gave you, real agility with, constant updates and things like that. Now what we're hearing is on-prem can give you that same agility. So what is it that actually you need from any one of those solutions? The same with what local support you provide. On region is really important for some. For others, actually, as long as the support can actually give you, what it is or how you need to operate, that's okay as well. But for each of these questions, you've got to really think about your organization and not just where you are now, but where you're heading. And I think, probably that last question for me, so critical. I would be challenging any vendor to give me names of 5 people you've worked with and let me talk to them. We know that it's really easy to kind of get swept up in the excitement of new tech, or maybe I'm just speaking as myself. I love it, right? I get excited about the potential and the opportunity and what it can do for us. But I've also lived through implementations and landing, at the end of that implementation phase where we've got this minimum viable product that really doesn't match up with what I thought we were getting. And whether it's a lost in translation component, we've used the same words, but we meant something a little bit different. How do you make sure you actually come up with ways through talking to others that have been through the same issue or same implementation? How do you make sure you, number one, get the what's and all story? Number two, can actually avoid some of the pitfalls? Because sometimes it's not actually that the solution wasn't the right solution. It's just that people hadn't thought of things along the way. So getting to actually speak to other organizations. And I mean, I put people in contact with others using the same systems all the time. And it's really such a huge opportunity to actually learn from, some of the challenges and mistakes that others have made. Doesn't mean they wouldn't go with that provider. It actually just gives you some real insights into things that you can actually build in to how it is you do your scope and development. So it's such a good opportunity. But I think these questions are fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's also important, especially from a customer service perspective, is to understand a bit about the technology and the infrastructure of a contact center. We often see there's a bit of a disconnect between
Yeah.
customer service and IT. IT will probably have their own roadmap. They've got their own vision for where they want to go in the future. And sometimes they deploy technology that they see fit for the business without even talking to the customer service team. So if the customer service team can understand a bit about the technology, it allows them to engage more with the IT and participate in that planning. And yeah, it'll help moving forward. So that's quite important, I think.
Phil, that's a really important component though. You need to have a strong voice. There's got to, the voice has got to be there, right? And if you are not at the table, you need to get at the table, because the solution will be an IT solution, not a customer-centric, customer-driven solution. And that's where you suddenly have these, I've seen some crazy mismatches between ROIs, expectations, what was built in a business case, we're going to get rid of 500 people. And what eventuates is we got rid of 50, but guess what? Budget got lost. So we have seen some crazy examples of where IT and business, because I call them separate things, are not actually aligned and not talking. So such a critical point.
It is. It is. Just conscious of time, so I will get on to
Let's
security,
move
because
on.
I know we had a question about it. So yeah, I mean, security is central. We hear about it all the time. And as I mentioned earlier, we are seeing a bit of a swing back towards more hybrid and private clouds for organizations that, there's strict regulatory requirements, and data sovereignty is one that comes up as a lot. So data privacy is forefront of any customer experience strategy, and especially with AI, some vendors are actually using customer data to train and refine their AI models. This does raise critical questions about data ownership and compliance. So if you're looking to deploy AI, you need to ensure that the benefits, the automation brings you a balance by a strong understanding of your responsibility to your customers as well. And all I say is be transparent, open, honest, about how customers' data is being used, what happens to it, where is it stored. I think that's really important. You had a question earlier. Can you just read that question again so I can see if I can answer it more
So
specifically?
specifically, it was saying, how do you ensure data is protected when considering using AI for local government agencies? So again, if you think about these 3 dot points, what are the types of things they need to understand and to really consider? So data sovereignty is about, again, where your data is stored. How is it managed? Who else, if anyone, has access to it? It's being used to train anything else. Like, what is it? And what's your organization's position on these types of things? So you really need to kind of have that setting the direction of your solution. You need to know your organization's position. Again, you touched on it, Phil. Some are moving back to that on-prem or fully contained data models for organizations specifically. But again, there's others that have gone in early that are now trying to kind of work backwards, and it's kind of hard, right?
It is, and it's not just around data storage. I mean,
Uh,
you can ask customers where or vendors where the data is stored, and they say, yeah, it's stored in region, but then it may go outside of the region to be, transactional information. It may go out to use a third party service somewhere. So what I would say to customers, and most, customers will ask vendors, are you compliant? That's the question they ask. I wouldn't ask, are you compliant? I would ask, how are you compliant? Get them to show you where your data is residing, where it goes, how's it being secured. And when it comes to AI as well, there are some challenges around over collecting. So some
yeah,
vendors will over collect data because they are actually using it to train their AI models. So ethical consideration comes in here. How are we treating customer data, and how are we using it to train our system? So there are vendors, and Enghouse is actually one of the vendors. We take an ethical approach to AI. So we know exactly how our AI engines are taught. We don't just let them ingest customers' data, which could potentially be biased. So we'll actually use humans, to train our AI engines. So they'll teach them, about specific topics relevant to a specific vertical as well. And this approach, is more accurate, it ensures there's better categorization as well. And it prevents issues like hallucinations and bias as well. So yeah, lots of things to consider with the AI world. There are regulations out there. I mean, security, there's GDPR regulations around how things should be transmitted and secure. I know there's ethical regulations now around prioritizing fairness and inclusivity in AI applications as well. So yeah, it's a whole new world when you enter AI. But yeah, ask the questions around to your vendors is how do they comply with all these regulatory requirements?
I think that's a really good additional component, not just are you compliant?
Hmm.
And it puts
Because
the onus of
everyone will say
responsibility.
yes. Yeah,
Yeah,
everyone will say
well, of
yes
course
to
they
that.
will. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But what does it actually mean? So no, I think that's a really critical component.
Cool. Um, I think we're coming to the end now. I just want to give a quick shout out to our next webinar, which is in the 2nd of October. So this is the next one in our kind of series, which is around the CX Buyer's Guide. So Chris Puxey will be looking at, AI to analytics and prioritizing the right technologies, for CX growth. So please make sure you register for that.
Thanks, Phil. And I think, really, you know, today's kind of that challenging our thinking a little bit, right? And really aimed at how do we get that discovery piece right? How do we know what we actually need to be asking for? Because again, it's so easy to get kind of caught up in the excitement of everything happening. This next session that we'll talk through with Chris around some of the analytic opportunities and, you know, really thinking about, you know, what is that growth opportunity? We'll just sort of take it to the next level. So super excited about that. Thank you for today. Mindful of time. I hope everybody has enjoyed it. I know we had a few that put messages in the chat saying they had to drop off, but we're looking forward to getting the recording so they could actually hear the rest of your session. So enjoy the rest of your day, everybody, and hopefully we'll see all of you on the 2nd of October for our next session. Thanks all.
Thank you, everyone.